What's going on, guys? Mike here with another cool video today. I got one of my ladies here. She's hanging out. They're enjoying this beautiful Sunday weather. It's finally spring, I think. We're past the winter. So today, what we're doing is we're laying out our raised bed garden for this summer's vegetable garden. What I have to do here is I have to pull out some landscaping bushes to allow me to have some walkway. And we're going to pop this up and fill it up with soil today. So stay tuned. But before we go, please don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll be following along this whole series here from start to finish of the vegetable garden. And I think it'd be an awesome series for you guys to follow along and see how I like to grow vegetables clean, organically, and straight from the garden to the dinner table. So
let's get into it.
So let's go ahead and get right into the video here. Alright guys, so what I'm planning on doing today is we're actually building the raised bed itself. So what I have here is 2 by 12 by 16 foot long boards here. This is pressure treated wood, just for longevity purposes. What I have is 5 foot in length, same 12 inches tall, so we'll have our it'll be a 16 by 5 foot raised bed. Now, I chose 5 feet wide. Some of you might be thinking that's a little too short. You're not going to be able to fit as much as you want, but I chose 5 feet because I want to be able to reach into the raised bed itself on either side and be able to get to the center without stepping on the bed or going into the bed. So that was the thought process behind that. Now, time will tell if that's not enough space or too much. We'll figure that out together. But if it is not enough, what I plan on doing is another raised bed next to it. Or maybe 3, 4, 8, 12, you know, the sky is the limit. So we will figure that out as time goes on. But today we're just doing this one. So stay tuned. Alright guys, so it's a new day. Something urgent came up yesterday when we originally were wanting to film this, but regardless, today's a new day. It's a little bit more cloudy. And we got the raised bed erected, if you will. We built this, what we did was we pounded 4 stakes into the ground in each corner, and then we screwed our boards to the stakes and then also to each other. What I didn't do though is I left this board unscrewed because we have to fill the bed up, and I think I have a plan to do that pretty easily. So I have an all-terrain vehicle, an ATV, a quad, a 4x4, whatever you want to call it, and I attach a trailer to the back of that. And I'm thinking, in theory, I can back the trailer up into our raised bed here, and then use the dump feature on it to dump the soil out and then spread it even, which saves my back, saves my arms, saves my fiance from having to scoop all the dirt, and I think it'll work out. But we're going to see together. If not, plan B is the old-fashioned way, and that's with a wheelbarrow. So if I have to, I will do that, but obviously less work is better. Yeah, we'll figure it out. Stay tuned, guys. Okay, so now it's time for the final piece of this puzzle. Let's go ahead and zip this in. So we got our last bit of soil in, as much as I can do with the wheelbarrow for right now. So it's time to put our last board up. Now I pre-measured these boards at 5 feet, so it should fit just right. It looks like a little low there, but we can add some soil to bring it up. So let me bring you guys in for a closer view, and we'll zip these right in. All right, so there we go. We have that buttoned up. Just giving you guys a panning view. The board was a little bit warped, as you can see there. Didn't want to get sucked in, and as you can see here, a little bit of an edge there in the corner, but it'll have to do. I'll probably end up filling all of this all the way along with marigold flowers, and in the back there, I'll do some kind of annual or a perennial. I'm sorry. Maybe like a strawberry. I do plan on putting blueberries here where these bushes are. I have one already dug up. We'll be doing blueberries, fig trees there, and I'll just be doing plants, perennial plants in front along the other edge of the raised bed. But yeah, here we go. So that's that. That's all filled up nicely. I got about one more wheelbarrow to fill, and then I'll spread all this out and go ahead and mix the rest of my amendments into the soil here. So stay tuned. Alright guys, so I wanted to just bring you in a little bit closer just to show you what the soil amendments I'm actually mixing into this soil. So to start, what I did was I built this soil. So it's 33% compost, tree bark compost with animal manure. I believe it's cow or horse manure. It's not completely composted. There's still a bit of sticks and stuff, but that's actually what I was looking for. I want that to become food for my fungal population in this raised bed as I'm growing and helping it develop and build. So I have the 33% compost. It's 33% peat moss, which I sourced locally. It's Canadian sphagnum peat moss, but it was sold in bales locally here for pretty cheap. I think I got 10 bales at 3.5 cubic feet each. I think they were like 15 bucks or something, 10 or 15 bucks a piece. So it wasn't too bad. And then I 33% aeration. And now aeration is just a stone, any kind of stone. Ideally it's a porous stone like a pumice or a lava rock. Unfortunately in my area that's just, it's not local, so it's very expensive to ship that stuff. So what I ended up doing was a crushed stone. 3/4 inch bluestone, and I believe it was a 1/8 inch crushed red rock or gray stone or something like that. But I did clean. I wanted to do clean because I didn't want to source any kind of outside heavy metals or minerals that I didn't want in the soil. So those three ingredients mixed, that was my base soil, which is an awesome potting mix, if you will. Now, what else I'm doing is I'm going to be adding in this soil nutrition or my amendments. What I have here is oyster shell, neem seed meal, kelp meal, and crab meal. All of these are pretty slow release nutrients, so it's going to take years and years for these to actually become plant available, although I'll explain as I go into them. Some are immediate and some are slow release. So let's get started in what I'm adding to the soil and why. So first we'll start with oyster shell meal. Now oyster shell meal is it's wonderful. It's what it does is it adds a ton of micronutrient. Next, I'd like to go over some of the soil amendments that I'm going to be mixing to that base mix to add fertility, especially on this first initial mix of soil. So let's get started with my oyster shell. I love to use oyster shell. What oyster shell provides is a great source of calcium and a ton of other minerals and micronutrients to the soil. I know that it's rich in magnesium, and I know that there's a good source of the very small, minute trace minerals that aren't really named in most texts. I can't really think of the names off the top of my head right now, but calcium does have a ton of those trace minerals that your plants are going to be looking for and will actually show deficiencies in if they're not available in the soil. Now the other great benefit to the other great benefit to oyster shell is the oyster shell is a slow release. It'll exist in the soil over time. It'll get consumed by earthworms and microbes, and then those beings will be consumed by other microbes in the soil, and it'll just kind of find its way through the soil food web and eventually to your plant's roots in the rhizosphere, where all those exchanges are made. So oyster shell is awesome. It sticks around in the soil itself, which I really do like and recommend for adding to your garden soil. Next, we have neem seed meal. Now, neem seed meal is a great source of nitrogen. However, that's not the primary reason why I add neem seed meal to my soils. The primary reason is for an integrated pest management, or to prevent pests. What happens with neem seed meal is when you mix it into your soil, your plants absorb the components of the neem seed meal that have a natural pest prevention, and it'll actually give your plants a systemic pest prevention aura about them, where pests just won't tend to go onto those plants that neem seed's planted into. They'll go on other plants around. What I'll use is sacrificial plants in the form of flowers and things that aren't really my primary focus on growing, which is pretty cool. So the neem seed meal is a great source of nitrogen, which eventually it will break down and become plant food, just like all these other amendments. But it also is a good source of potash and, like I said, the pest prevention. Now what you can do with neem seed meal as well is you can make teas out of it and then turn that into a spray. I don't recommend doing that in the later stages of the season when your plants are starting to throw fruit and vegetables. The reason being is it'll leave an oily sheen on your plants, which is why it kind of sticks to the plants in the first place, and that tastes very foul. I don't recommend spraying, but I will spray it in the beginning of the season to give it that good coat in the early stages when the plants are most vulnerable to pest attack. And that should help ward off a lot of pests. So it'll be in my arsenal of IPM, integrated pest management methods, but it's not my silver bullet. That's not what I'll be using throughout the season. But that's primarily why I mix it into my soil, is to give it the plants the systemic ability to ward off pests. Next is my kelp meal. I like to add kelp meal to my soils mainly as a food for the earthworms and a food for the microbes. This stuff essentially feeds the soil. Now it's also a great source of nitrogen, potassium, and it also has a good source of phosphorus. And kelp naturally has a ton of those trace elements that the calcium has, or the oyster shell has, but primarily this stuff is going to be a really easy, low-hanging fruit for the soil to eat and the earthworms to eat and feed on while they're wiggling through the soil. And then they'll process all those micronutrients and macronutrients into plant food. I really love using kelp. Now, the other great benefit of kelp is you can also make a tea out of it and spray it directly onto your plants if they need a boost of nitrogen, a boost of green. Usually after a storm, after a heavy wind, or if there's damage to the plants that it's out of my control,
I will make a quick kelp tea, and then I'll spray that on the plants, and it'll really burst that green. You'll see them turn green almost immediately, and then even they'll start to throw new shoots out. The next day or 2 days later, they'll have new growth that's really vibrant and green. So kelp is almost like a magic tea, if you will, when you brew it properly and feed it to your plants using a foliar feed to your plants. So I really recommend having a bag of kelp on hand. If you don't mix it into your soil, at least make teas out of it, which is really cool. And we'll go over that later on in the series of how I do that and how I like to apply that. Moving over to the final amendment here is crab meal. Now, crab meal is an awesome source of calcium. It's an awesome source of nitrogen, potassium. It's really cool. Now, the takeaway with crab is it's only 1% nitrogen, but that's water soluble or immediately available to the plants. The crab meal is a long-term solution, so it takes a really long time for this stuff to break down and become plant available. So what the benefit here is I mix it into the soil, and I know that a couple years down the road, this crab meal will just be finishing up breaking down into the soil. And in the beginning and the end of every season, I'll be top dressing this crab meal and allowing the earthworms to kind of pull it down into the raised bed, which is gonna constantly give me that cycle, if you will. So I'll have at year 4, I'll have crab meal in the soil that's completely broken down, then year 3, year 2, and then the current year. So it'll be a constant, perpetual cycle of different stages where the crab meal is in its decomposition, which is really cool. So I like to add crab meal just to give the soil that long-term longevity of a good, robust nitrogen and calcium source. So with all of these, let me move out of the frame here. So with all of these soil amendments, I feel I'm getting a nice, well-rounded, balanced nutrient program that's going to be feeding the soil, protecting the plants, feeding the soil biology. So I really recommend, if you're going to make a raised bed garden, to consider some of these soil amendments. Now, a lot of farmers and gardeners, they just use compost, and that's great. Compost does have a lot of these nutrients, macro and micro, but I feel that if I can add something, if I can make things a little bit better for the soil to really kick off strong, especially in a brand new mix, I'm going to go ahead and do that. So you can get these products. I'll put these in the link below. All of these can be ordered from Amazon in this quantity as well, or smaller. They do make just a 5-pound box, and it's just a small box, which is awesome for if you're just going to brew teas, or if you're just going to top dress the soil. That's what I'll do moving forward, is the smaller boxes. The big bags were just to get that initial mix in. So go ahead and check that out in the link below, and let's move on.
Alright, so I got you guys at a different angle here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead. Now I have a 2-cup measuring cup here, and it reads 2 cups. So I know for the oyster, we're doing half a cup per cubic foot. Now I have about 100 cubic feet in here, but we've already added about half of what we need. So what we're going to do is about 25 cups. We'll do 24 for ease of math. So let's go ahead and start doing these. This is 2 cups at a time. And I like to just give it an even dusting and even broadcasting over the soil. We're going to go a little bit heavier here because this is, if you can remember, this was where we just added our soil, most of the new soil. Now, don't worry if it's not completely evenly blended. This doesn't have to be precise. What we're going to be banking on here is that the earthworms and the soil biology helps move some of this stuff and distributes it throughout the soil. But yeah, that's what we do here, is just a nice good sprinkle.
Guys, so I went through, I mixed the soil, I mixed the amendments in really well, really deep, and I tried to flip the soil as many times as my arms and back would allow. And then what I did was I came through with a rake and I raked it out nice and smooth so that the bed is as even as it's going to be. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to spray this down with water, and when I do that, a lot of these nutrients are going to activate, and the bed might heat up a little bit. But luckily, I did this. It is March 17th at the time I'm recording this. So this bed has at least a month and a half to kind of heat and allow all these the microbe activity really increase and then sort of slow down a little bit. But for the time being, I'm just wetting it, letting it sit, letting the natural air and the wind and birds, everything to come through and do what they're going to do. Add the indigenous microorganisms into the soil itself. And then I'll come through probably 2 or 3 weeks and I'll add my cover crop. Around April 1st I'll come and I'll broadcast my crimson clover cover crop, which we'll cover at a later time. But for right now, let's just get some water on this thing and call it a day. Oh, and as always, don't forget to like and subscribe.